The mining crew on Kepler 442b didn't hear the first warning until it was already too late. Not the seismic alarms. Not the thermal spikes. Not even the automated safety system that was supposed to shut everything down the moment the ground became unstable. It was the ice itself screaming. At first, Dr. Ethan Cole thought it was interference. A static distortion rippling through the comms network, like solar radiation chewing through the relay satellites. The kind of problem you fix with a reboot and a complaint to corporate. Then the ground sensors spiked. Depth pressure, rising. Subsurface temperature, dropping too fast to make sense. And the vibration signature. That was wrong. Ethan leaned closer to the console inside the temporary habitat dome, his visor reflecting rows of red warnings. "Mark," he said quietly, "tell me that's a sensor glitch." Chief Engineer Mark Dalton didn't answer immediately. He was already running diagnostics, fingers moving faster than the system liked. The display kept flickering between normal ice sheet stability and something that looked like movement. Not seismic drift. Not tectonic shift. Something coordinated. Either it's a glitch, Mark said at last, or the entire planet just decided to stretch. Lieutenant Harris, standing near the airlock controls, gave a nervous laugh that didn't sound like it belonged in a place this far from Earth. Planets don't stretch. The ground answered him. A deep, resonant crack rolled beneath the mining site. Not loud like thunder. Not sharp like breaking glass. It was slow. Heavy. Deliberate. Like something enormous shifting its weight after a very long sleep. The ice field outside the dome fractured in a straight line that shouldn't have been possible. Cracks spidered outward in geometric patterns, too clean, too structured, too intentional. Ethan stepped closer to the reinforced glass. "Those aren't natural fractures," he said. Mark swallowed. "No. They're not." A second crack followed. Then a third. And with each one, the temperature inside the dome dropped, as if something beneath them was drawing heat inward like breath. The comms system hissed. Static. Then. A voice. Not human. Not even close. But speaking their language anyway. Bloody, humans. Every helmet in the room turned toward the floor. Silence dropped so hard it felt physical. Lieutenant Harris whispered, "That came from under us." Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. Because the drill site, 2 kilometers out across the ice flats, had just stopped reporting depth data entirely. Not failed. Not cut off. Just erased. Like something had reached up and turned it off from below. Mark grabbed the emergency override panel. "We need to evacuate. Now." The ground answered again. A deeper crack. Closer this time. The ice beneath the dome's outer perimeter bulged upward slightly, like something pressing from underneath, testing pressure, learning the limits of its prison. Ethan's throat went dry. "How deep did we drill today?" Mark hesitated. That hesitation said everything. 1,800 meters, he admitted. Harris cursed under his breath. "We were supposed to stop at 1,200. Mark snapped back. The core sample readings were impossible. There was a void layer, something hollow under the ice sheet. We thought it was a cavern system. Ethan's eyes never left the ground. "And you kept going." "We were trying to map it." Another crack. This one didn't spread outward. It opened inward. A section of ice near the drilling site collapsed downward without falling debris. No crumble. No collapse noise. Just disappearance. As if the ground had decided that part of itself was no longer necessary. Then came movement. Slow at first. Then unmistakable. Something large was shifting beneath them. Not digging. Not burrowing. Waking up and turning over. The comms flared again. Stronger this time. Closer. The voice was clearer now, edged with irritation, like someone dragged out of sleep by construction noise. "I said, bloody humans." A pause. Then, sharper. "Are you lot drilling into my roof?" The dome went silent. Even the system seemed to hesitate, as if unsure whether to continue reporting reality. Lieutenant Harris whispered, "That's not possible." Ethan finally tore his gaze away from the ground long enough to look at him. "We're past possible." The ice outside the dome cracked once more. And this time, something pushed through. Not fully. Not yet. Just a shape, too large, too precise, too structured to be anything natural, pressing up from beneath the frozen crust. The outline of something like a claw or limb, but not animalistic. Too clean. Too deliberate. Like machinery shaped into life, or life shaped into something else entirely. The pressure sensors inside the dome went from green to red in less than a second. Then to black. Mark stepped back slowly. That shouldn't exist under ice. Ethan's voice was barely above a whisper. Then explain it. A pause. No one did. Because the ice outside the dome stopped cracking. Stopped moving. Stopped everything. For a moment, there was only silence. Then, one final sound came through the comms system. Not angry now. Not confused. Just, awake. Oh. And the ground began to open. They didn't find a monster. That was the first thing Dr. Ethan Cole realized when the external drones finally breached the collapsed ice layer. They found an egg. Not organic in any natural sense they understood. Not carved. Not grown like a coral structure or crystallized formation. It was constructed, smooth segments of material fused together in overlapping arcs, each one etched with faint geometric lines that pulsed weakly in response to heat signatures. The object sat inside a vast hollow beneath the ice sheet, suspended in a cavity that should not have existed. The walls were too smooth, too evenly curved, as if something had melted reality into a perfect chamber and then let it refreeze around it. Lieutenant Harris's voice came through the comms, tight with disbelief. That's not geology. Chief Engineer Mark Dalton zoomed the drone feed. That's engineering. Ethan didn't answer immediately. He was watching the thermal overlay. The egg wasn't cold. It was alive. Not biologically warm like an organism. Something deeper. A steady, internal heat signature that didn't fluctuate with environment, as if the object generated its own physical laws and simply imposed them on surrounding matter. Send a probe closer, Ethan said. Mark hesitated. If it reacts. It already reacted, Ethan cut in. We're standing in its bedroom. The drone descended slowly, lights cutting through the dark ice cavity. The egg filled the frame now, massive, easily the size of a transport ship. The etched patterns along its surface shifted subtly as the light passed over them, like eyes tracking movement. Harris swallowed audibly. If that thing hatches. A sound interrupted him. A crack. Not from the ice this time. From inside the egg. Everyone froze. The drone feed jittered as internal stress sensors spiked. A thin fracture line appeared across the egg's surface, glowing faintly blue along its edges. Then another. Then another. Ethan stepped closer to the monitor. Mark, is that structural failure? Mark shook his head slowly. No. That's controlled fracturing. The egg shuddered. And then. It spoke. Not through comms. Not through radio interference. Directly into every headset on board the mining base, bypassing all channels like it had always had access to them. Oh. The voice was young. Annoyed. Extremely awake. What the actual? A pause. Then, more loudly. Did one of you idiots just drill into my house? Silence hit the dome so hard it felt like pressure. Lieutenant Harris took a step back. That's not a translation error, right? Mark's face had gone pale. No system I know translates that tone of voice. The egg cracked again. A segment of its outer shell shifted outward slightly, revealing a glimpse of something within, dark, layered structures like folded wings or limbs still forming. And the voice returned, now closer, sharper. Seriously. I go to sleep for a few thousand cycles and I wake up to a demolition crew. Ethan forced his voice to work. We are, mining operations. We did not know you were. Living here? The voice snapped back immediately. Yeah, I noticed. Another crack. This time, the fracture lines glowed brighter, spreading in deliberate paths across the shell. Do you know how hard it is to find quiet nesting space in this sector? I picked a frozen, uninhabited rock. A dead world. That was the whole point. Harris whispered, it talks like it pays taxes. Mark muttered, it talks like it owns lawyers. Ethan raised his hands slightly toward the COMMIC, though he knew instinctively it didn't matter. We can stop drilling. We didn't intend harm. A pause. Then the voice said, slower now. You drilled through my spine. Silence. Ethan blinked. Your spine? The egg shifted again. A deeper crack spread through its center, and a claw, impossibly large, too precise in its structure, pressed outward through the fractured surface. Not breaking free. Testing. Feeling. The voice exhaled through the comms like a sigh of irritation. All right. New situation assessment. The claw paused. 1. I'm awake early. Again. Fantastic. Another crack. 2. There are small loud creatures outside my shell. A third crack. 3, they're apparently not leaving. The shell expanded slightly as something inside pushed harder, but still controlled. Still measured. Then the voice shifted tone entirely. Curious now. Okay. Question. Are you the dominant species on this rock? Harris looked at Ethan. Do we answer that? Ethan stared at the egg. I don't think it's asking socially. He leaned closer to the MIC. We are the only known intelligent species on this planet. A long pause followed. Then, a sound that might have been laughter. Oh. The word lingered, echoing faintly through every comm channel. Oh, that's adorable. The claw pushed further through the shell, widening the fracture. Blue light spilled out like molten sky. All right, the voice said. I've got bad news for you lot. Another pause. The shell cracked wide enough now that the outline of a massive head began to form inside the glow, still incomplete, still waking. You didn't find an abandoned mine. The egg pulsed. You found a nap site. And then, softly, almost conversationally. And I am very behind on my schedule. The egg shattered outward in one controlled burst. Not explosion. Emergence. And the thing inside took its first breath in millennia. They didn't get time to process what had just happened. The moment the egg finished opening, and Dr. Ethan Cole stopped calling it an egg in his head, the entire ice cavern changed. The hollow space beneath Kepler 442b's crust wasn't empty anymore. It was occupied by something that had decided, very calmly, that gravity was optional and patience was negotiable. Kath, because it insisted on a name the moment it finished forming its voice properly, unfolded itself in stages. Not like a creature emerging from a shell. Like a machine booting up a body it had not used in a very long time, checking each subsystem with casual irritation. First came the head. Long, angular, and scaled in lead plates that shimmered between deep obsidian and faint cobalt glow depending on how the light struck it. Its eyes opened last, bright, intelligent, and immediately unimpressed. Then the neck, coiling with slow precision. Then the forelimbs, each movement testing physics like it was personally responsible for their existence. And finally, the wings. They didn't unfurl gracefully. They strained. Ice dust rained from the cavern ceiling as massive structures unfolded with a sound like tectonic plates grinding reluctantly after being asked to move too early in the morning. The mining crew instinctively stepped back. Lieutenant Harris whispered, "That's a dragon." Mark Dalton replied without looking away, "That is a very large problem with wings." Kath blinked once. Then spoke. "Do you mind?" The voice was no longer just inside the comm system. It was in the air itself now, resonating through the cavern walls like pressure waves given intention. Ethan raised his hand slightly. "We didn't know anyone was living here." Kath interrupted, lifting its head. "Yes. I heard you the first time you said it wrong." It shifted its weight, and the ice beneath its claws groaned. "Correction, I was sleeping here. There's a difference. One implies consent." Harris whispered, "We're being lectured by a dragon about property law." Mark muttered, "And losing." Kath turned one eye toward them. "Also, you drilled through my spine." Ethan exhaled slowly. "We were mapping subsurface voids. We thought it was geological." Kath stared at him. "Then you saw a perfectly stable, sealed structure under kilometers of ice and thought let's poke it." A pause. "That tracks." It flexed one wing experimentally. The movement sent a shockwave through the cavern, rattling loose ice like hail. Then it winced. "Oh. Okay. That's worse than I remember." Mark stepped forward slightly, unable to stop himself. "You remember this place?" Kath tilted its head. "Not this exact rock. But similar ones." Another pause. Less drilling. The mining crew exchanged looks. Ethan tried again. "We're not hostile. We can leave the site. We can repair." Kath made a sound that might have been a sigh or a laugh. "Repair." It tested the word like it tasted strange. You don't repair a house after collapsing half the roof into the occupant's skull. You rethink your life choices. Silence followed. Then Kath shifted again, more carefully this time, and began stepping out of the shattered shell remnants. Each step was measured, deliberate, like it was learning balance again. Or relearning restraint. Harris leaned toward Ethan. "Is it calming down?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. "I think it's assessing us." Kath heard that. Of course it did. "Correct," it said immediately. "I'm deciding whether you are A. incompetent, B. unlucky, or C, about to become a long-term inconvenience. Mark raised a hand slightly. We prefer peaceful coexistence. Kath paused. Then slowly. That is not one of the options I listed. A beat. But I admire the optimism. The ice cavern trembled again as Kath finally stretched fully, wings half unfurled, filling the entire chamber with shadow and shifting light. Its body was immense, but not clumsy. Every motion had a kind of contained precision, like something built to move through environments far larger than this one. Ethan realized something then. This wasn't a creature adapted to this planet. It had been placed here. Stored. Contained. Or hidden. Kath turned its head sharply toward him. Don't do that. Ethan blinked. Do what? Think loudly. Harris swallowed. It can read thoughts. Kath snorted. No. You humans just have expressive brain activity. It's like listening to machinery arguing with itself. A pause. Also you're very loud thinkers. Mark muttered, that's humiliating. Kath stepped forward again, closer this time. The crew instinctively backed up. It stopped. Not threatening. Just observing. Let's establish baseline reality, Kath said. You drilled into my containment site. Ethan nodded cautiously. Yes. You woke me early. Another nod. You are small. That one wasn't a question. Yes, Ethan said carefully. Kath considered that. Then. Unfortunate. Silence. Then it added, almost conversationally. But not immediately lethal. Harris exhaled shakily. That's good? Kath flicked its tail slightly, sending a ripple through scattered ice debris. Now, it said, voice shifting tone again, more focused. Tell me something important. Ethan stiffened. What? Kath leaned closer. Its eyes narrowed slightly. What else is awake on this planet? The cavern went quiet again. And for the first time since the drilling began, Dr. Ethan Cole realized the worst part wasn't that they had woken something ancient. It was that whatever Kath had been guarding against might not have stayed asleep just because it did. Kath didn't leave the ice cavern the way anything else would have. It didn't crawl, climb, or dig its way out. It simply decided the space above it was no longer optional. The ice ceiling above the mining site fractured in a widening circle as Kath rose through it, not with force alone, but with a kind of controlled pressure, like reality itself was being politely but firmly asked to move aside. The dome of the mining base shuddered as sensors screamed environmental warnings. Chief Engineer Mark Dalton stared at the readout. It's destabilizing the entire ice shelf. Lieutenant Harris backed away from the observation panel. We're going to get buried. Dr. Ethan Cole didn't look away from the exterior feed. Or we're going to get ignored. Kath emerged fully into the open air. The surface of Kepler 442b was not welcoming. Thin atmosphere. Low pressure. Bitter winds cutting across endless white plains. The sky above was a dim, bruised gray, like the planet itself had forgotten how to be anything else. Kath paused. Then inhaled. The wind shifted around it. Not because it was blocked. Because it was reordered. The dragon flexed its wings once, carefully, experimentally. Ice dust and frozen particulate lifted into the air in spirals. Then it said, "This atmosphere is disrespectful." Mark whispered, "It's judging the weather." Kath crouched. The ground cracked slightly beneath its weight. "All right," it muttered. "Let's see what's usable." Then it jumped. It did not fly. Not even close. Kath hit the ground again almost immediately, sending a shockwave through the ice plain that rattled the mining dome. Silence followed. Then Kath's voice came through all channels, perfectly calm. "I meant to do that." Harris rubbed his faceplate. "It always says that." Ethan finally spoke. "It did not mean to do that." Kath lifted its head from the crater it had made. "Correction," it said. "I meant to test structural response." A pause. "It failed." Mark muttered, "That's one way to describe gravity." Kath stood again, slower this time. Its wings flexed, but not with confidence. More like calculation. "Atmosphere density is insufficient for standard lift profile," it said aloud. "Also, I hate this wind." Ethan took a cautious step forward, speaking into the external channel. "You might need to adjust wing load distribution. The air is thinner than." Kath turned its head sharply toward the base. "Do not patronize me, small one." Ethan stopped. Not patronizing. Observing. A pause. Then Kath sighed. Fine. Continue. Mark stared. It's taking advice. Harris whispered, we're mentoring a dragon. Kath crouched again, this time slower, more deliberate. It extended its wings fully. The span was enormous, casting a shadow over the entire mining site. Then it tested airflow. It shifted weight. It adjusted angle. It muttered to itself. Wing loading is wrong. Balance is wrong. Everything about this planet is wrong. Then, quieter. I miss proper skies. Ethan frowned. Where did you learn flight dynamics? Kath paused mid-adjustment. Experience. A beat. And a lot of falling. Then it jumped again. This time, it stayed in the air for almost 3 seconds. 3 seconds of absolute silence. Then it dropped. Hard. The impact carved a trench across the ice field, sending waves through the frozen crust like ripples through glass. Kath lay still for a moment. Then. That was, closer. Mark exhaled. It's learning. Harris pointed at the crater. It's breaking the planet while learning. Kath lifted its head. I heard that. Ethan raised his voice slightly. You're close. You just need more lift and less sudden thrust. Kath snorted. You say that like I have infinite attempts. Then it paused. Do I have infinite attempts? Ethan hesitated. We don't intend to interfere. Kath stared at him. That is not an answer. Silence stretched. Then Kath slowly pushed itself up again, wings trembling slightly. Not from weakness, but from unfamiliarity. Like a tool long unused being forced back into motion. It flexed. Adjusted. Tested air currents again. The wind around it began to respond differently now. Subtly. Like it was starting to recognize intent. Mark noticed first. The airflow is stabilizing around its wings. Ethan nodded slowly. It's adapting to it. Harris shook his head. Or it's adapting the air. Kath crouched again. This time, it spoke more quietly. I remember this being easier. Then it launched. The force was controlled this time. Not raw impact. Not brute motion. A shaped release of energy and motion that carried it upward instead of downward. It rose. Slowly. Unsteadily. But it rose. For a moment, it hovered above the ice plains, wings trembling against the thin atmosphere, body adjusting in real time to conditions it had not experienced in millennia. Then it stabilized. Barely. But enough. Kath went very still. Oh, it said softly. A pause. Oh, that's what I was missing. The mining crew watched in silence as the dragon held itself in the air for the first sustained time. Mark whispered, it's actually flying. Harris replied, don't jinx it. Kath heard him. Of course it did. I am absolutely flying, it said. A beat. Then, more smugly. And I am doing it better than expected. It climbed higher. The wind shifted again. Not resisting it now. Accommodating it. As if the sky itself was reluctantly agreeing that Kath had earned the right to be there. Below, Dr. Ethan Cole stared up at the impossible silhouette against the gray sky. Because somewhere far above the atmosphere, early warning satellites began to flicker. Something in orbit had noticed the disturbance. And whatever Kath had just awakened inside the sky was about to notice them back. Kath stopped treating flight like a miracle the moment it became repeatable. The second descent was cleaner. The third was deliberate. By the fourth, it was no longer learning so much as reclaiming something it had once considered basic physics. But the fifth flight was different. Because the sky answered. Dr. Ethan Cole saw it first through orbital telemetry. A flicker in the high satellite grid. Then another. Chief Engineer Mark Dalton leaned over the console. That's not interference. That's targeting scan behavior. Lieutenant Harris turned slowly toward him. Who's targeting what? The answer came before anyone could pretend ignorance. The outer orbital perimeter alarms went off simultaneously across 3 independent systems. Not one fleet. Not a signal glitch. A formation. Structured. Coordinated. Approaching. Ethan's voice dropped. We're not alone in this system anymore. Outside, Kath was still in the air. It had climbed higher than any biological mass should reasonably sustain without engineered assistance. The thin atmosphere of Kepler 442b should have been insufficient, but Kath was no longer negotiating with should. It had stopped falling. It had stopped struggling. Now it simply moved, adjusting air pressure around its wings like it was shaping invisible currents with thought alone. Then it froze mid-air. Not from instability. From attention. Its head tilted upward. Far beyond the clouds. Beyond the thin sky. Into orbit. Oh, Kath said. The word carried strangely through comms, calm, almost conversational. That's new. Ethan's console lit up with incoming long-range scans. We've got multiple unidentified vessels entering low orbit. Mark's face went pale. How many? A pause. Too many, Ethan said quietly. Harris swore. They're not ours. Kath heard all of it. Of course it did. Its wings shifted slightly, adjusting altitude without effort. The air itself seemed to bend around it now, not fully obedient, but no longer entirely indifferent. So, Kath said slowly, voice carrying across open channels. You lot woke me up on a backwater ice world. A pause. It rotated mid-air, orienting toward the sky. And there's a war happening overhead. Mark whispered, that's not a war. That's a fleet. Kath corrected him instantly. Same concept. More paperwork. The mining crew went silent. Above them, the first ships broke atmosphere. They were not elegant like human craft. They were too angular, too layered, designed for efficiency and intimidation rather than aesthetics. Their hulls reflected the dim light like blades moving through water. Weapon systems powered up in synchronized pulses. Ethan watched the readings spike. They're scanning the surface. Harris pointed at the main display. They're locking onto us. Mark snapped, why are we a target? Ethan didn't answer immediately. Because something else had already answered for him. Kath descended slightly, then stabilized again, hovering just above the ice plains. Its voice came through all channels, base comms, orbital relay bleed, even unregistered emergency frequencies. Let me guess, Kath said. They saw the wake signal. A pause. And now they're curious. One of the ships in orbit shifted position. Weapons brightened. Kath exhaled. It was almost bored. Bad news for them, it said. Ethan stiffened. Kath, don't engage. We don't know their intent. Kath tilted its head slightly. Intent is irrelevant. Capability is the only honest language. Mark swallowed. That's not reassuring. Kath ignored him. It folded its wings halfway. The air pressure around it tightened. Not violently. Structurally. Like the atmosphere itself had become aware it could be used. You should all step back, Kath added casually. This might get loud. Harris shouted, that's not a plan. Kath responded immediately. It is the only plan currently in existence. Above them, the fleet opened fire. The first orbital strike was not subtle. A beam of coherent energy sliced through the atmosphere toward the surface, aimed at Kath's position. The mining crew braced instinctively. But Kath didn't dodge. It looked up. And the air stopped it. Not exploded. Not deflected. Stopped. The beam bent mid-descent as if encountering an invisible boundary, dispersing into a spiraling distortion before reaching the ground. Silence hit the comms for half a second. Then Kath spoke. That was rude. A pause. Try again. I was looking away. Mark stared at the display. It just cancelled the strike. Harris whispered, it didn't block it. It erased it. Ethan's voice was low. That wasn't defense. That was control. Kath lifted higher. The sky around it began to shift. Not clouds. Not weather. Currents. Atmospheric layers responding to its presence like water remembering a shape it once held. All right, Kath said. Let's establish terms. Another pause. You wake me up on a contained world. You breach a sealed site. You introduce yourselves poorly. It looked up again at the fleet. Now you bring weapons into my atmosphere. The air pressure dropped. Every sensor in the mining base spiked at once. I am beginning to think, Kath continued, voice calm, almost disappointed, that none of you read the warning labels. The fleet adjusted formation again. More weapons powered. More targeting systems locked. Ethan realized something then. The fleet wasn't reacting to Kath like a creature. They were reacting like it was a strategic anomaly. Something classified. Something expected to be gone. Something that had just been found again. Kath spread its wings fully. The sky darkened around it, not from clouds, but from pressure changes, like the atmosphere itself was compressing around a focal point. Last chance, Kath said. A pause. Then, quieter. Leave. The fleet didn't. Kath sighed. Fine. It ascended. And the sky finally learned what it meant when something in it stopped asking permission.